This particular topic, coding decoding, is made up of two words. One is coding, one is decoding. Now, what is coding? Coding is a process that we use to convert our original message to some secret form. And decoding is a process that we use to convert a secret message back to original form. So, in this particular topic, what would happen that in this particular topic, my examiner will give me a question where words will be given certain codes, and now I have to find out a second word or third word's code, what it would be, right? See, when it comes to coding decoding, in coding decoding, we have total 15 to 16 logics. And suppose in my exam, if a question is going to be there on coding decoding, sir, applying all these 15, 16 logics within the time frame, आपके पास पता है आपको एक क्वेश्चन में कितना टाइम है क्लैट के एग्जाम में? पता है कितने क्वेश्चंस आते हैं? 120. कितना टाइम होता है? 120 मिनट्स. हाँ, तो 120 मिनट्स, 120 क्वेश्चन, 120 मिनट्स पर क्वेश्चन 1 मिनट. जाहिर सी बात है वो 1 मिनट में तो होना नहीं है, कितने तो पैसेज बेस्ड आते हैं तो पढ़ने पड़ते हैं. ठीक है, तो चलिए 1 मिनट का अगर हम टाइम भी ले लीजिए, मान लीजिए कोडिंग डिकोडिंग पे क्वेश्चन आता है. सो फॉर दैट कोडिंग डिकोडिंग क्वेश्चन आई हैव ओनली 1 मिनट. नाउ अप्लाइंग ऑल दीज 15 16 लॉजिक्स विद इन 1 मिनट ऑफ टाइम to observe that my question is based on which logic is very, very difficult. I know this very well, right? So what we are going to do in coding decoding, sir, we are going to bifurcate all these logics according to the types of question, because when it comes to coding decoding, in coding decoding we have only 4 types of questions: type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. And now suppose in my exams, somehow if I am able to decide to find out that my given question is of which particular type, whether it is type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, then I am going to apply logics of only that particular type. For example, let's take a hypothetical case where I say, let's say type 1 question contains 4 logics, type 2 question contains 3 logics, type 3 question contains 2 logics, and type 4 contains 5 to 6 logics, let's say, right? So I have bifurcated my logics to the types of question. Now suppose in my exam somehow if I am able to find that my given question is of type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, then I am going to apply logics of only that particular type. For example, somehow in my exam if I was able to find out that my question is of type 1, then I am going to apply all the logics of type 1, all the 4 types of logics of type 1. And even after applying all the 4 logics of type 1, if I don't get my answer, this tells me I am making a mistake. I am going to find out what mistake I am making, right? This is how. So what we are going to do, instead of memorizing the logics of coding decoding, sir, in coding decoding we are going to memorize the language of the question, because somehow in my exam if I am able to find out that my question is of this particular type, I am going to apply logics of only that particular type, right? And when it comes to memorizing the language of the question, by that I do not mean that I am going to memorize the entire grammatical language of the question, right? I will give you certain observations. I am going to give you certain keywords using which you can find out that my question is of type 1, type 2, type 3 or type 4. Okay. So when it comes to solving the questions of coding decoding, right, whether you want to solve in order to solve any type of question of coding decoding, whether it is type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, you require ABCD, right? So you all are familiar with ABCD? सभी को आती है? The correct format of writing ABCD from now onwards would be this. The first 13 letters of your ABCD, that is from A to M, are going to be written left to right, right? Which is your conventional way of writing anything in English language, because see, whenever we read anything in English language, we read left to right. So the first 13 letters of your ABCD are going to be written left to right, that is your conventional way. And the last 13 letters of your ABCD, that is from N to Z, right, are going to be written right to left, starting below from M. When you write ABCD in this manner, it gives you 2 cycles of 26 letters. One in alphabetical order, one in reverse alphabetical order. For example, if you read these letters in alphabetical order, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. After Z, what? Again, it is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. Suppose if you read it in reverse order, Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, H, I, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. After A, what? It will be again Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R. right? So what happens every time you remain within these 26 letters, when you write ABCD in this manner, every time you are going to remain within these 26 letters. And make sure this particular pattern is very, very important. This pattern of ABCD is again going to be used in the questions of letter series. So when you write ABCD in this manner, it gives you two cycles of 26 letters, one in alphabetical order, one in reverse alphabetical order. And remember that whenever you move from one letter to the other letter in alphabetical order, so the gap between the letters would be positive. And whenever you move from one letter to the other letter in reverse alphabetical order, gap between the letters would be negative. Okay, for example, if I move from letter, F to letter J, then in my ABCD, I can see that I'm moving in alphabetical order because F will come first, right? J will come later. So I'm moving in alphabetical order. So gap between the letters would be positive. And the gap is of how many letters? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? See, it is my normal practice that I always count second letter in my gap. What some people do, they just count the in between letters. कुछ लोग क्या करते हैं, केवल बीच के letters count करते हैं. But it is my normal practice that I always count second letter in my gap because it helps me to solve the type 4 questions a bit easy. It makes type 4 questions a bit easy, right? So that's why I'm always going to count second letter in my gap. So here the number of letters between F and J will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So the gap will be plus. Similarly, let's say if I am moving from letter Y to letter D. Now moving from Y to D, I am moving in alphabetical order. And the gap is of how many letters? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So this gap will be plus 5. So whenever we move from one letter to the other letter, the gap is positive. Right? In alphabetical order, the gap is positive. And now suppose if I move from one letter to the other letter in reverse alphabetical order, for example, let's say I am moving from T to Q. So moving T to Q, I can clearly see I am moving in reverse alphabetical order. So gap will be negative. And the gap is of how many letters? 1, 2, 3. So this will be minus. बात समझ में आई? ठीक है, तो एक मैं क्वेश्चन पूछता हूं, बताएंगे. Let's say I am moving from letter N to letter K. क्या होगा गैप? Minus. We are moving in reverse alphabetical order and gap is 1, 2, 3. So this will be minus 3. Right? So remember that to solve any question of ABCD, to solve any question of coding decoding, you require ABCD in this manner. So what I will suggest that please write ABCD at the top of your notebook in this manner, right? So that you can also solve questions with me in the class itself. To solve any type of question of coding decoding, we require this ABCD. So इसको लिख लीजिए. Now see, in my exam, sir, how I am going to decide that my question is of which particular type? So suppose if your examiner gives you a type 1 question, then in that case, your examiner is going to give you a word and against that word, he will give you its respective code. And then he is going to ask you the code of the second word. So remember that whenever one word is given, its respective code is given. An examiner asks you to find out the code of the second word. The question will be of type 1. Whenever one word is given, its respective code is given and your examiner asks you to find out the code of the second word, the question will be of type 1. And now how we are going to solve the questions of type 1? What are the things that I should keep in mind while solving the questions of type 1? What are the points where I can make a mistake in the exam while solving the questions of type 1? To make you understand that, please let me solve the first question for you. The first question is very easy. Some of you might be feeling tempted to solve that question, but please do not solve that question, right? Because there are certain important points which I need to tell you where you can make a mistake in the exam, and I can tell you those points only with the help of an example. Right. So in my exam, how I am going to decide that my question is of type 1? My examiner is going to give me a question like this. If rose is written as TQUG, then how biscuit can be written in that code? See, one word is given, its respective code is given. And now my examiner is asking me to find out the code of the second word. So obviously this question is of type 1. One word is given, its respective code is given, and my examiner is asking me to find out the code of the second word. So the question will be of type 1. We know this very well. To solve any type of question of type 1, we require this ABCD, right? So for the first few questions, I am going to write this ABCD, right? So that I can show you the gap between the letters. And after a few set of questions, when I feel that you people are already familiar with the gap finding out, right? I am going to stop writing. उस time से फिर मैं directly gap लिख दिया करूँगा. आप अपनी ABCD में check करेंगे. Now see, one word is given, its respective code is given, and my examiner is asking me to find out the code of the second word. This tells me that the question is of type 1. So as I saw a question of type 1, the first and the foremost thing I am going to do, that I am going to write the letters of my code just below the letters of the word. I will write the letters of my code just below the letters of the word. As I write the letters of my code just below the letters of the word, I saw that my word contains 4 letters, my code also contains 4 letters. This tells me that here each letter is given 1 letter code. The word contains 4 letters, the code also contains 4 letters. This tells me each letter is given 1 letter code. So this raises a question in my mind, कि sir, is it possible that my code can have more number of letters than the letters of the word? Yes. कैसा हो सकता है कि कोड के अंदर वर्ड से ज्यादा लेटर्स हो? Yes. So remember that somehow in your exam, if your code contains more number of letters than the word, then don't think it is a typing mistake. There could be a possibility where multiple letter codes were used. ठीक है, अगर कोड में वर्ड से ज्यादा लेटर्स हुए तो ये मत सोचिएगा कि क्वेश्चन में कोई टाइपिंग एरर है, राइट? हो सकता है कि वहां पे मल्टीपल लेटर कोड्स लिखे गए. ठीक. So let's say for an example, my code was a 5 letter. My code was 5 lettered. My word was only 4 letter. Now this clearly tells me that here one letter is given multiple letter code. So now if let's say the first letter of the word was given 2 letter code. Let's say the first letter of the word was given 2 letter code. Now is it a rule for my examiner, sir, if my examiner gives first letter a 2 letter code, now is it a rule for my examiner that the remaining letters of the word should also be given a 2 letter code, or he can keep the remaining letters of the word just 1 letter code? Sir, if your examiner gives a 2 letter code to the first letter, there is no rule for the examiner that the remaining letter should also be given to 2 letter code. Your examiner can keep the remaining letters as 1 letter code. ठीक है, अगर पहले लेटर को 2 लेटर कोड दिया है तो ये जरूरी नहीं है कि अब बाकी बचे वर्ड के सारे लेटर्स को भी 2 लेटर्स का कोड दिया जाए. नहीं, वो 1 लेटर का कोड रख सकता है. बट दिस अगेन रेजेस अ क्वेश्चन इन माय माइंड कि सर देन इन माय एग्जाम हाउ आई एम गोइंग टू डिसाइड that which letter is given a 2 letter code or a 3 letter code or multiple letter codes and which is not? Sir, with experience this will automatically start coming to you that which letter is given multiple letter code. Experience के साथ खुद ब खुद समझ में आने लग जाएगा कि किसका कितने लेटर का कोड लिखा हुआ है. Not to worry, right? तो एक चीज ध्यान में रखिएगा कि if your code contains more number of letters than the word, then it is not a typing mistake. There could be a possibility where multiple letter codes were used. ठीक. So now after writing the letters of the code below the letters of the word, now suppose for letter R, if T would have been the code, suppose for letter R, if T would have been the code. Suppose means I am taking an assumption. I am not sure whether the code of the letter was written immediately below it or at any other place. Right? Suppose for letter R, if T would have been the code, now as I move from R to T in my ABCD, I am moving in alphabetical order. And the gap is of how many letters? 1, 2. So this will be a +2 gap. This will be a +2 gap. Now suppose for letter O, if Q would have been the code, moving from O to Q in my ABCD, I am moving 2 letters forward, right? So this will be a gap of +2. For letter S, if U would have been the code, now moving from S to U in my ABCD, I am moving 2 letters forward, so this will also be a +2 gap. Similarly, for letter E, if G would have been the code, moving from E to G in my ABCD, I am moving 2 letters forward. So this will also be +2 gap. So now here I can see that for every letter, the code was at a gap of +2. Now I have to find out the code of the word biscuit. I have to find out the code of the word biscuit, right? In the same code language. So if I use the same code language for the first 4 letters, the gap is going to be +2. Now, what about the remaining 4 letters? What about the remaining 3 letters? See, if your second word contains more number of letters than the first word, if your second word contains more number of letters than the first word, then in that case, you expand your logic. And if your second word contains less number of letters than the first word, in that case, you compress your logic. For example, here my second word contains more number of letters, so I will be expanding the logic. Since I needed to expand or compress this logic, this tells me that sir, this gap sequence between the letters should always form a logical sense. क्योंकि हमें यहाँ पर logic को expand या compress करना पड़ सकता है, So this tells me कि this gap sequence should always form a logical sense. इस gap में हमेशा कुछ ना कुछ logic होना चाहिए. This tells me कि my examiner cannot give me a random gap sequence. कि उसने कहा कि sir, let's say first letter was at +2 gap, then second letter was at -5 gap, then third letter was at -2 gap, then fourth letter was at +3 gap. ऐसे randomly कुछ भी gap नहीं लिख सकता है. This gap should always form a logical sense. Why? Because we needed to expand and compress our logic. अच्छा, किसी के दिमाग में अगर ये क्वेश्चन है कि सर लेट्स से फर्स्ट वर्ड कंटेन्ड 4 लेटर्स, सेकेंड वर्ड ऑल्सो कंटेन्ड 4 लेटर्स, तो क्या रैंडम गैप लिख सकता है? नहीं, तब भी नहीं लिख सकता. इट शुड ऑलवेज फॉर्म अ लॉजिकल सेंस. ठीक है ना? इट शुड ऑलवेज फॉर्म अ लॉजिकल सेंस. नाउ सी, सिंस हियर गैप वाज कांस्टेंट थ्रू आउट द वर्ड, सो फॉर द रिमेनिंग 3 लेटर्स द गैप वुड बी कांस्टेंट. तो +2 +2 +2. ठीक है? And third and the most important point, sir, do not try to find spelling mistakes in the questions of coding decoding. What I mean to say, कि instead of, let's say, instead of writing the spelling of biscuit as BUSCUIT, suppose if my examiner writes spelling of biscuit as BESCUIT, then simply find out the code of this spelling. इस spelling को correct करने मत बैठ जाइएगा कि नहीं सर बिस्किट की spelling गलत है, आई आना चाहिए था. ठीक है ना? Right, so there are 3 important points that you should remember. First, right, if your code contains more number of letters than your word, then that does not mean it is a typing error. There could be a possibility that multiple letter codes were used. Second thing, do not try to find spelling mistakes in the questions of coding decoding. Third thing, if your second word contains more number of letters than your first word, in that case you expand your logic, and if your second word contains less number of letters than the first word, in that case you compress your logic. Right? So now, for letter B, 2 letters forward, the code will be D. For letter I, 2 letters forward, code will be K. For letter S, 2 letters forward, code will be U. For letter C, 2 letters forward, code will be E. For U, 2 letters forward, code will be W. For letter I, 2 letters forward, code will be K. And for letter T, 2 letters forward, code will be V. So, D, K, U, E, W, K, V. This will be your answer. Right? Clear everyone?
अब एग्जाम की तैयारी को और बेहतर करने के लिए हमारे चैनल को लाइक, शेयर और सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें.